But did you know?
Am I allowed to just open with that? As something that's ostensibly an ad for our own shit? I don't know, but the Emoji Movie just battled Dunkirk for control of the weekend box office, so maybe Original Sin is just our own shame catching up to us. Or maybe the Emoji Movie really isn't all that big of a deal because kids under 18 actually like it, so maybe even if it's dumb, you'll remember that one film you desperately begged your parents to see when you were a kid was a thinly veiled ad for basic things that are freely available in the public domain. Or maybe we're all doomed to suffer the anguish of a tormented existence. Look, that wasn't even what I quickly wanted to talk about. Part of having the ability to go full-time was this being able to expand what Chainsaw Suit can be. Without further less than extemporaneous ado, we now have a second channel with all the existing gaming content from this one going to that one, cleverly named Chainsaw Suit Games. There's already cool shit on there right now, like Russ Pitts has a stellar documentary series called Stage of Development. Ben Padden is taking Port Center over there for all future episodes, and Chris and I made a short film called Hierarch behind the scenes of the best game ever to kick off his new show, and devilishly fun to make docu-series in the vein of Christopher Guest. And I joined forces with VGReleaselist.com for the new video game releases of the week. Look, we have mighty aspirations for this grand YouTube experiment. On to the, this is going to be one of those real downers, isn't it? Episodes that people know are going to be sad tend to feature some overdone number, generally like One Direction's Perfect, but since I canonically retired that song from existence in this show and also pissed off thousands of people who still seem to be mad I used a trendy boy band to illustrate the juxtaposition of a family man against what happens to Jake Gyllenhaal hot on the case of a serial killer everyone had moved on from, I need something new. Something fresh, something snappy, something to get the people going. Like always, I sat down and recorded part of a song that a lot of people find annoying in an effort to whimsically narrate a layer of depth that a throwaway pop song didn't exist with before. By playing it against a movie in almost random fashion, you come across certain happy accidents where you'll literally never be able to listen to a simple song the same because I have forever mutilated it with unforeseen and now wholly unavoidable meaning. But what could possibly apply such meaning to a film like Pan's Labyrinth? Well, I'm glad you asked. We've been staying in Paris to get away from your parents. You look so proud, standing there with a frown and a cigarette, posting pictures of yourself on the internet. Out on the terrace, we breathe in the air of this small town on our own, cutting class for the thrill of it, getting drunk on the past we were living it. If we go down, then we go down together. They said you could do anything, they'll say that I was clever. If we go down, then we go down together. We'll get away with everything, let's show them we are better. Yeah, I went there, huh? Pan's Labyrinth was a 2006 film written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, someone whose largest films I'm sort of famously tepid on. Films like Pacific Rim and Bellboy. That's a typo, though Pacific Rim sounds very relaxing. Pacific Rim and Hellboy, but I am forever in deep, deep mad love with Kronos and The Devil's Backbone, where a ghost kid has a head injury and the blood is just seeping in the water that isn't there. The visual has haunted me for 15 years. I think it goes without saying that Guillermo is one of this planet's most gifted eyes in the most visual medium, and I just happen to like his movies more in that way you make everyone you've ever met watch a film. The ones he's got his hooks in a little deeper than robot punch fights, which is why your Blu-ray looks like somebody brought it to salsa dancing on Mojito Thursday. You know, Pan's Labyrinth, a delicate, fantastical take on using metaphors common with the coming-of-age film, but like weaponizing them against you. To use a woefully inadequate comparison, Pan's Labyrinth is like the Peter Jackson version of The Dark Crystal, but maintained in such a style that one frame of this thing is distinctly Del Toro, the only game show that asks you to guess which filmmaker created this specific frame of a movie. Are you ready? Question 1. Guillermo del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, Guillermo del Toro and Guillermo del... Look, he has an aesthetic. That's a huge reason he is so loved, but I struggle to name another del Toro movie where every facet of the movie operated at the same level as this one. Well, maybe Blade 2. Of course Blade 2! The term fairy tale came into existence in around 1690, coined by one Madame de Aulnoy, herself an author of fairy tales, though it is almost impossible to know when we first started telling them to our kids at night because they date back some 6,000 years to the Bronze Age, where those probably weren't the most exciting stories. Oh hey, what fantastical thing do you want to tell stories about tonight? I don't know, honey, I guess bronze. Here Guillermo is paying homage to those first versions of fairy tales, telling sort of his own, though not quite, setting it in a classical time period, though modern by fairy tale standards. These are the stories before they got sanitized and whittled down, and a changing appetite for stories where the kids don't make it out in the end, like this one. And this is where I lost the thread a little bit in the 6 times I had to watch this to put this piece together. I mean, I'm sure fairy tales in their original form drove the point home when the lessons were, know how to get home, or a witch will bake you and eat you, or, oh, innocent prank because you're too young to know better. Add the threat of being eaten alive by a natural apex predator. That'll learn them good. Therein was my disconnect, or it was. Guillermo has been very careful to refer to this movie as a parable, not a fairy tale. And I think there's a good reason for that. A parable can actually teach you something useful about how we relate to each other as people. There's a moral lesson in play in parables. To surmise dutifully, Pan's Labyrinth is a parable wearing the clothes of a fairy tale to say something meaningful about the human condition and how we as people can do better. In fact, Ophelia is infatuated with one specific fairy tale in the story, which is the movie illustrating the entire point back to us. By telling us about Princess Moana, no, not that one, who dies and her spirit returns to the underworld where the king of said underworld will build labyrinths for all eternity for her to solve. Ophelia cannot handle the world around herself, so she attempts to live in a fairy tale, believing herself to be that princess, only to be turned into a parable. And that parable is, don't believe in fairy tales. Even if, in your imagination, your guide to the underworld is a beautiful faun that can't find reading glasses in his size. Instead of your stepdad, a desolate, egocentric pile of puke grenades playing dress-up to compensate for his lack of any strength of moral character. Fairy tale versus reality. But our entire story is then told from the point of view of the person that believes in fairy tales. The film takes place in June 1944, a place and time where absolutely nothing was going on the world stage during a time in Spanish history called the Francoist period, or a time not too far after the Spanish Civil War, where the country was flirting with this whole fascism thing, which started in 1936 with a coup supported by, oh hey, Stalin. And while this is going on in 1944, many supporters of the former government were trying to overthrow that Franco boy and his Francoist period. It's a time of some pretty serious upheaval for Spain, being pulled in any number of directions, and our story sits down right in the middle of that, where people are already making pretty bad decisions, like marrying and fathering a child with a psychopath on a power trip. Oh, Jesus Christ! And it feels like a move a mother who is out of moves would make, and it was the wrong move. And I don't think Ophelia is really telling her fairy tale about Princess Moana because she actually believes it. Not really. She's using her imagination to find solace in a horrible situation. It's her coping mechanism. Hell, it's our coping mechanism. It's Pavlovian. Don't believe me? Watch this. Ophelia finds her own comfort in the song her nanny, Mercedes, used to sing to her. It literally conditions you to need the only nice thing in her life, a theme. a beautiful, unforgettable one. And the score was beautifully composed and realized by Javier Navarrete, garnering an Academy Award nomination in 2007 for Best Original Score, but he ultimately lost to Babel, which I'm not sure aged that well as a decision. Nothing against Babel, but the lullaby is forever etched in your brain when you see this film. I'm not kidding about it being Pavlovian, by the way. Just hearing it makes me immediately sad without even knowing why. And that's just my interpretation. That's the beautiful thing about film, is that you can just as easily form the reverse interpretation where Ophelia is dying to go live out eternity in a fantastical underworld with her mom, dad, and a tricksy faun. It gets a little muddier from there, as Del Toro has said that as a result of his Catholic upbringing and the fact that Pan's Labyrinth is a spiritual sequel to The Devil's Backbone, once a Catholic, always a Catholic, he said, where the underworld is a metaphorical interpretation of that religious text, a very loose one from my perspective, but smarter people than me say Alejandro González Iñárritu described it as a truly Catholic film. That certainly makes the journey that Ophelia goes on easier to digest and, function as a human being for the rest of your day instead of disintegrating into a pile of tears next to a half-eaten bag of Samracetones. If we go down, we go down together. To give us all a breather, let's talk about how lavishly magical the practical effects in this movie really are.
But did you know
that the faun is not only played by legendary character actor Doug Jones, but he learned all of the faun's lines phonetically in Spanish so that the lip movement would eventually match Pablo Adon, the actor they got to match it in post later. Del Toro's direction for the faun was to go rock star, like a glam rock star, but less David Bowie, more Mick Jagger. One of the super interesting things that the movie does is juxtapose the army fighting the resistance, even tracking the heat of their campfires to gauge distance, and Ophelia trying to feed, 3 rocks to a magical toad in a tree, which she crawls through some serious mud and grime to get to. Now, one could assume that, given where we are in history, that the resistance plotline is the real thing going on in the background, while Ophelia's adventures in Toad Forest are just flights of fancy. Which is where I'd say, look a little closer. They end up being the same plot, which is sort of mind-thumping, but stay with it for a second. Vidal's eventual downfall, which is a stand-in for that of an oppressive army, hence his wildly reckless oppressiveness, is caused because both of these plot lines intersect in our climax. While Ophelia never really interacts directly with the resistance, her nanny does. All of these plot lines, fantastical and otherwise, all come together in the end. Fantasy, in a lot of ways, is a stand-in for bravery, or at least its catalyst. It certainly gives Ophelia the strength to stand up to Vidal in a way that no one else can. Well, maybe Mercedes, because she chops his face in half.
Why so serious?
I mean, she kidnaps her brother away from him, which sets up his eventual downfall. Even if she's living in a fantasy world, whether real or not, the fantasy world led her down the path to destroy this guy.
Porque esta gente parte de una idea equivocada, que somos todos iguales. Y si para que nos enteremos todos hay que matar a esos hijos de puta, pues los matamos. Y ya está.
And could we talk about the dinner scene? Because holy inflated monkey intestines, does Vidal demonstrate what a piece of forgotten excrement he really is, because he thinks murder is a fine dinner conversation and then blasts Ophelia's mom, his wife, Carmen, for attempting to humanize him in, well, she's clearly lying about how they met and attempting to put a nice spin on it, and he swats it away and her feelings like nothing. He has next to zero human empathy and cares about nothing but his regime and legacy. The dinner scene goes on with a random subordinate telling the story of his father dying in battle and smashing his watch on a rock so his son, this guy, would know how a true soldier acts. Again, he just swats it away, but he carries around a smashed watch that he checks before running into battles. Add sniveling liar to the mix of bad things about him. Look, there are so many characters in this film, so many people to care about, and except for Mercedes and her brother, not a lot of them survive. The Dr. Carmen, Ophelia, countless resistance fighters. War has a toll. And Ophelia likes grapes. Okay, that one, I can see the religious symbolism because it's written on the palms of sweaty eyeball hands. Is it a war film? Is it a fantasy? Yes. The answer is yes, because it has something to say about both, at times simultaneously. I mean, this movie is not afraid to get weird, and we are actively encouraged to care about both halves equally. No small task for a filmmaker to get an audience to care about the covert goings-on of a resistance force fighting a destructive regime, and little ginger root babies bathing in milk that can heal you. The plot lines mirror each other in a way both plot lines are attempting to solve their own labyrinth, so to speak. It seems like two disjointed things, but you soon realize that it is two jointed things. Gonna work on that one. The chalk doors, the ginger root baby, the fawn, the toad, the labyrinth, it's all a means to an end, and that end is stopping tyranny. What is the point in the end? Everyone has a part to play, and whether fantastical or not, Ophelia plays the most important role in the resistance, regardless of age. Arguably, Mercedes plays the other important role. Together, they do the impossible. Underestimated by everyone, including Vidal. Regretting that one, aren't you, you dick slurpee? I've struggled this whole piece trying to put a warm, happy face on something that is ultimately quite sad. In war, people die, including children, especially children, because of men like Vidal, stupid, ignorant baby people who pretend louder than they bite. So when they have to bite, they just kill people. It's like his only move. It's a cycle with no end, like war. It is an impossible problem with seemingly no solution, and as the numbers in the resistance dwindle, so too do their chances of stopping someone that Mercedes finally turns into the monster that he truly is on the inside. Regardless of interpretation on the fantasy, Ophelia's sacrifice, whether she knew it or not, ultimately led to the destruction of this power-hungry lunatic. Mercedes too, her escape after she stabs the captain a few times gets a number of the enemy forces killed, turning the tide in the battle. But Ophelia steals her brother away from Vidal, and Ophelia is very smart. She's running from a wounded man, and as she hears him get close, she turns to face him, knowing he won't shoot her with her brother, his son, still in her arms. She runs through the labyrinth, meeting the fawn and smashing both storylines into each other, and she solves them both. The requirement to open the end of the labyrinth, Pan's Labyrinth, though Pan is just a name added in a few territories based on the mythology of the region. The word Pan literally means nothing, as it was added by marketing people, but not important. There is no Pan. Anyway, Ophelia refusing to spill the blood of her brother to open the underworld under the guide of the fawn, but Vidal catches up to her, takes the baby, and shoots her. Finishing both plot lines in the process, the enemy is defeated and Ophelia opens the underworld with the blood of an innocent, her own. Both plot lines converge in that single moment, but she died in the process, and wherever you land on religion or faith or politics or anything, she died because war sucks for everyone.